Hello, and welcome to our conversation on the changing role of the CIO. I'm Bennett Richardson, President of Protocol. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our partners at Lenovo for making today's event possible. At Protocol, we aim to arm you as decision makers in technology, business, and policy with actionable news and analysis to help you do your job. The cloud let chief information officers become more strategic and focused on building business value instead of managing IT as a cost center. Then the pandemic thrust CIOs into an even more central role, becoming crucial in managing remote work, navigating abrupt changes in business operations, and, of course, accelerating digital transformation. In this event, we'll explore the next evolution of the CIO within modern enterprises. We're so glad you could join us. If you're not already subscribed, don't forget to sign up for Protocol Enterprise and Protocol's family of newsletters at protocol.com/newsletters. To kick things off, I'm excited to introduce Ken Wong for an executive conversation on the way that businesses are responding to digital transformation. Ken is president of Lenovo's Solutions and Services Group, which plays a critical role in Lenovo's transformation from the biggest PC company in the world to a services and solutions leader. Ken has been with Lenovo since 2006 in a wide range of roles, including president of the Asia Pacific region, chairman of Lenovo's joint ventures with NEC and Fujitsu, and for several years, he ran Lenovo's global corporate strategy group. Ken is based in Hong Kong, and I'm pleased to have him with us. Ken, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Bennett. Thanks for having me here.
So, Ken, you have had a front row seat to digital transformation in the modern enterprise. Can you share your perspective on how the role of the CIO has changed over the past few years?
Oh, thank you, Bennett. I think this is a great question. I have been traveling around the world in my different roles, and I talked to a lot of CIOs who are also my friends, right? So I think, first of all, there's no denying that the role of the CIO was changing even before the pandemic. Now, digital transformation is a long race and a super ultra marathon. So in my perspective, I think the move to hybrid or remote work is the catalyst that speeds up digital transformation and innovation at an unprecedented pace. Now, the CIO role has become even more strategic and engages all facets of the business, for example, from HR to finance to corporate responsibility. Now, so today's CIO, instead of just managing IT as a cost center, so many of my CIO friends are now focused on delivering value through the development of new business models and revenue streams. Now we're in an era of every company is a technology company, no matter what products or services it provides. So if your tech stack falls behind, so does your business.
That's a great point. And I'd love to take a moment to talk about Lenovo's own transformation. Can you tell us more about how Lenovo transformed its business to help customers adapt to these new challenges around digital transformation and capture new business opportunities?
Well, thank you. Another great question, right? So, as organizations, IT leaders deal with more complex tech environment. For example, I think we are all overwhelmed with all the buzzword like 5G, edge, hybrid cloud, things like that. So we at Lenovo sees an opportunity to help our customers to simplify and also solve their toughest IT and business problems. So we leverage our status as one of the world's technology leaders with almost 4 decades of experience. So while we will continue to empower our customers with top hardware and devices and mission critical infrastructure, we're now expanding our offerings to include leading edge services and solutions. Now, at Lenovo, in order for us to deliver our customers desired outcomes, so we invest heavily in R&D and our own capability. We actually deploy our own technologies and innovation to meet our own needs as a Fortune 500 companies, as you know, using ourselves as a testing ground before leveraging these solutions to our clients. Now, let me give you an example. So last year, the industry, not just in our industry, but in many industry, are suffering from supply chain crunches. Now, in Lenovo, we deploy extensive AI to reduce our PC production planning time from 6 hours to just 90 seconds. And here is the magnitude of our operation. It involves tens of thousands of employee schedules in the factory, more than 300,000 parts and materials, and ever-changing flood of orders, right? So with the CIO organization fully merged into SSG, which is the Solutions and Services Group in Lenovo, we are actually in the best position to connect and leverage all Lenovo's innovative end-to-end technology offerings. And our ability to offer pocket to the cloud solution is what sets us apart from other solution providers. So last September, right, in our Tech World event, we actually launched the TrueScale Everything as a Service, which brings all our as a service offerings under one umbrella to provide a truly global solution that offers everything from devices to the cloud via one-stop contracting structure. And this fully integrated as a service strategy combines the power of our smart devices, our smart infrastructure, and smart solution businesses in a new way for our customers. So to go back to my earlier point on rapid changes from digital transformation, so whatever the challenges our clients have, we want to provide the simplicity, the scalability, and also flexibility as our customer grow.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense and seems like a smart approach. Ken, we're about to hear from 4 CIOs from some of the biggest companies in the world. As we hand things over, if you were in their shoes, what would be the one thing that might keep you up at night?
Well, I think as I share, I actually talk to many CIOs. This is part of my job and by far the most important. So one thing I commonly heard is from our CIO is how can I simultaneously reduce redundancy in my tech stack and also future-proof my business to stay nimble and capture new opportunities. So the need to stay focused on what really matters and what ultimately drive business result and executing on them will be what kept our CIO at night, right? In the CIO role. So doing what matters, I think we need simplicity and flexibility. And today's CIOs are being pulled in so many directions. Keeping up with the pace of technology is exhausting, right? Especially, when they need to balance, operation responsibility and business priorities, right? So, we have done a global survey recently with a lot of CIOs, right? So there are, a lot of great insight that we figure out. So number one is most CIOs say, their business will feel an impact in no more than a few weeks if they stop spending on digital transformation. Now, this is how critical it is to invest in solutions that will grow with your business. The other insights is actually, among all the CIOs that we surveyed, 40% of their current tech stack was actually delivered in as a service manner. And more than 90% of the CIOs that we survey said they will consider adding new as a service offering over the next 2 years as a result of a changing business model, right? So in Lenovo, our mission is to help our customer future-proof their business with laser focus on the outcomes to be delivered, right? Through deeper channel partnership, investment in innovation, and a unique global perspective to deliver end-to-end technology solution from pocket to cloud.
That's great and really helpful context and insight. Thank you so much, Ken, for being with us today. And thank you again to Lenovo for your partnership.
Thank you, Bennett.
Now I'm excited to bring up Tom Krazit, Protocol's Enterprise Editor, and our moderator today to introduce our panel. Tom, take it away.
Hi, Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us today. Thanks also to Bennett and Lenovo for kicking us off. My name is Tom Krazit. I'm the enterprise editor for Protocol, and I'm joined today by 4 CIOs and tech leaders from some of the biggest companies in America to talk a little bit more about how CIOs are adjusting to life these days and the kinds of things that will drive really the next decade of consumption in enterprise tech. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And Sheila, why don't we start with you?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Sheila Jordan, the Chief Digital Technology Officer here at Honeywell.
Rob, let's go over to you next, I guess.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Tom. I'm Rob Carter. I'm the Global CIO at FedEx Corporation, and really have a lot going on around the world, per that last conversation. Should be an interesting conversation for us to have.
Chris, I guess you're next.
Sure. I am the CIO at ServiceNow, software company out of California, and great to be here.
And last but not least, Vittorio.
Thanks, Tom. Here's Vittorio Cretella, CIO at Procter & Gamble, participating from Cincinnati, Ohio, and glad to be here.
Well, thanks again to all of you for joining us. So let's start off today by, I wanted to really get a sense of how much of your time is spent directly in terms of dealing with the tech infrastructure, the tech leaders, but also dealing with the business leaders at your respective companies and balancing the needs of the business against the needs to modernize your tech stacks or to really drive innovation forward there. How do you think about that balance, and how has that balance changed really over the last couple of years? And whoever
You just want us to popcorn in, I'll
Sure.
jump. So yeah, the balance continues to change, but kind of the good news story for me here at FedEx is this technology job has had a seat at the table for a long time. I've been a long sitting CIO here for 22 years. I've worked directly for Fred Smith, our chairman and founder, and I'm really fortunate in the fact that Fred is an information architect. He thinks about technology a lot, sort of based the company on a technology premise. But, we've all been slingshot into the future here through the pandemic and through these last couple of years. And so the dialogue has escalated. And I agree that you can't stop innovating. You can't stop investing in your digital presence. And that dialogue has become really rampant across the business. All the lines of business are very focused on delivering with digital capabilities.
Yeah, and I can just jump in there. In terms of a ratio, if you had to pick one, I would say it's 90% of the time spent on how are we driving the business forward, creating value for customers, creating a talent advantage for our employees. But I would say that's no substitute, and I'm sure people on the panel would agree, for being brilliant at the basics, right? You talked about the tech ops and infrastructure being a diminishing part of the role, for sure, but you can only spend less time there if it's running like a well-oiled machine. So I think brilliant at the basics allows the tech organization to really take a lead role in doing everything Rob just mentioned, which is driving the business forward with digital technologies.
Yeah, so the one thing I'd like to add is I agree with both what Rob and Chris said, and stepping back, I think it's important to recognize that most CEOs care their top 5 priorities are growth, 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 and growth, right? So I think as an IT organization, one of the silver linings out of COVID is that it made the technology become very real and relevant to every single individual in the organization. So as executives are using and supply chain executives are using this technology, they're thinking, well, why can't I apply it to this? And why can't I do this? And why can't I use it for customer facing examples? So it just opened up the aperture so substantially on what the technology can do for your business. So I think that, we spend a lot of time, we have a very, very, very aggressive digital transformation agenda here at Honeywell. In fact, last time I counted, we have 42 active programs, which one is consolidating ERPs, so you can imagine what the other 41 are. But it's really important. It's very important for the growth and the transformation of the company. every single function, every single strategic business unit has a digital agenda, and we get to sit square in the middle to help orchestrate that.
I would add that I've used a rough formula during my career. I must say it hasn't changed. So the CIO spent 1/3 of the time in technology, 1/3 of the time engaging with stakeholders, whether the peers or bosses or different lines of business, and 1/3 on people developing talent. Now the content has changed. In the field in technology, we are looking at things and we are innovating in areas that, especially in CPG, we didn't think about 20 years ago. But fundamentally, if you miss one of those three elements, regardless, and especially now in the midst of digital transformation, with digital being so mainstream to everything we do, then you are in trouble. And I will insist on one of those, which is talent. Today, that's what keeps me awake at night. Is not so much how to introduce automation in AI, which definitely is a big tech challenge that many of us deal with, but more how to make sure that we continue to feed the talent pipeline with brilliant technologists who have a good business perspective.
I definitely want to come back to some of those AI questions, so let's remember to do that. But sort of as you think about this role that you all play in sort of bridging the technology organization and the business organization, are there any specific things you can point to that have worked well for you and your organization that you think other people who may be watching this and trying to figure out how to make this work for their own companies might benefit from knowing?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. I really think you got to stay away from, we all get enamored by the technology, but you got to kind of stay away from technology for technology's sake. You've got to understand the business and understand what the business pain points are, what the reality is, what the goals are, the objectives, KPIs. I mean, where is the CEO and chairman want to take the company, and how can technology enable that? So it's really super important that you understand the business strategy and you really marry the technology to be able to go accommodate that. A perfect example for us at Honeywell is we all know what's happening in supply chain, and especially around inflation. So inflation is a real cost, and we're all trying to figure out exactly what to do with that and how do you manage that. We tied that to our pricing initiatives where we could actually think about how we can effectively and smoothly transition some of the inflation cost through dynamic pricing. And that all came through an enterprise data warehouse and the technology that we could be able to do that globally across all of our different business units. So it's a real example like that it was hitting us pretty hard, and we were making sure that we could accommodate that problem, business problem, vis-a-vis the technology.
Yeah, and for me, what I would add is embedding this discipline around measuring and the creation of value throughout the technology organization, whether that's a cycle time improvement in terms of deal velocity, or it's a productivity improvement for our customer support organization or NPS, making sure the whole tech organization is measuring itself on the same outcomes as Sheila just mentioned that are important to all the senior business leaders at the company. And I think that too many times it's, well, that's their metric, or, I got my stuff covered in terms of the software deployment. And I just think the sooner tech organizations hold themselves accountable to the same metrics, the faster the digital transformation is going to proceed.
I can actually attest to the fact that Chris does that. Having visited him and worked with some of his senior executives, they really do hold themselves accountable to that kind of metrics-based IT platform. I'm going to steal Vittorio's 3 things because we're focused on a framework that does 3 things. We focus on the environment. So compute has changed radically over the last decade, and so we talk about environment shaping, and frankly, we're jettisoning all of our enterprise data centers. The environment that we run compute in is radically shifting to cloud and colo and hybrid, which is super important. We've also, the second big area we've focused on is demand and business agility. We were kind of all over the board, all around the world, in how we managed demand and could see it coming in. So we've worked really hard these last couple of years to build a business agility framework where we all speak from the same lexicon. We all manage demand as it comes at us, because in my experience, there's always more demand than there is supply. So you have to be really crisp in how you manage demand. And then the last one was the same thing that Vittorio was talking about. talent shaping. How do we shape talent? Where is talent available to us in the world? How do we tap into it? So environment, demand, and talent, those are the big three that we focus on.
I would add that we are obsessed with creating the best consumer experiences in the world. And we have so many opportunities being a company that with 11 categories that are present in so many homes, billions of consumers around the world. And creating digital capabilities where our consumers and customers are embedded in the lines of business with agility and speed, while at the same time creating a backbone of platforms that will facilitate that speed, I think is the winning formula. So making sure that you create those cross-functional conversations, activities, and at the same time you support them with a very solid backbone and solid technology foundation.
So let's dive into some of those technology foundational principles that you're all, I'm sure, implementing slightly differently based on your business needs. And one thing I find always fascinating about this industry is that there is no one way to do things. That there are, depending on your applications, depending on your business needs, there are different infrastructure and SaaS strategies that you can pursue to accomplish those. And hearing from different people who are working on problems in different ways, I think is always super interesting. So I wanted to ask specifically about something we've been talking about a lot over the last couple of years, really pre-pandemic, but I think, really underscored, the experience of the last couple of years has really underscored this, is the concept of shadow IT and how you think about how, your business units, how individual, line workers want to increasingly, manage and acquire the tools they need to do their jobs themselves. At the same time, you're all responsible for managing your company's technology assets, the budgeting around that, the security around that, the integration around that, which is no small feat. I'd love to hear from each of you sort of how you think about that particular question, how you manage the willingness to let business units sort of drive the train a little bit more than maybe they had over the past decade, but while keeping sure that you have a tight grip on everything that's happening.
I'll get started so that we break the flow and we shuffle it a bit. So I think, first of all, you need strong governance so that you make sure that any software, any cloud service, any SaaS that is introduced is vetted, especially from an info security point of view. And you need a process that is thorough, but at the same time is agile. And you achieve that by automation. Second, you need a strong texture because the value come in these capabilities are plugged into a backbone for data integration, analytics, identity access management, and operations. And so that will minimize the cost of a standalone solution that is not well integrated. But finally, and most important, I'd say, you need a strong digital strategy that delivers what the business needs and the capabilities in lines with the business needs. And therefore, this department level purchases are limited to specific requirements and don't become the rule.
I agree with that. And I think this may be a little bit contrarian, but I think shadow IT has a real negative connotation to it. And I think as technology leaders, we need to embrace what these folks are trying to do. I mean, they're, as you said, they're buying technology. They're not doing it for the fun of it. They're doing it because they need to get a job done. And I think as we as technology leaders, as Vittorio mentioned, if we can provide them platforms where they can build these apps themselves. I think I read a Gartner stat that said 40% of the workforce today is equipped to digitize their own stuff. We just need to let them, but as Vittorio mentioned, it's got to have the right governance, the right cyber posture, making sure curated data sets are available. All of that stuff is the hard work that we need to do. But I truly think that if we do that, we can let all the talent in our companies actually participate in their own digital transformation without having to come to a central organization. And back to the talent advantage, I think the younger generation entering the workforce, they want to. They don't want to wait for a central organization. So I think it's up to us to embrace this, embrace shadow IT, bring them into the fold with platforms that actually let them develop on their own, digitize on their own, and be model data scientists, all of that.
Yeah, so I kind of agree and disagree, and I have a little bit of a different perspective. I'm a highly regulated business, and some of our businesses, we just have lots of regulation and compliance issues. So one of the things I worry about is that I'm totally supportive. I think the IT organization has to provide the capabilities the business is asking for, and how I do that is through architecture. We have something called a global design model. We have 21 strategic platforms of which we roll out to the organization, and then the organization decides what the enhancements are, what's next, how do I want to use that platform. So it's pretty organized and structured. I agree with Chris. We want to make sure that teams have the capabilities to build on that. But quite honestly, I have a slogan here at Honeywell. It's better, cheaper, faster, and safer. And I tell you, the security aspects and the safer part is becoming an even more component of what we're doing within the IT technology and data. So even a SaaS application, if the business purchases it with their what I call credit card applications and put it out there, if no one's aware of the data going in and out, that could have tremendous implications to the organization, negative implications. So we really do put guardrails around. I agree with Vittorio that we got to think about governance. So it's through architecture. We get to architect it and see where these solutions fit in the architecture. We want to move fast, absolutely want to move fast, faster, better, cheaper, but we got to make sure that we're also protecting the company's assets of the company. And unfortunately, that does require the skill set that IT brings much more than the discipline that the business traditionally has.
I'm going to come at it through a data lens, and everybody mentioned data, but we pivoted this story to be data centric, and we've promoted data to be a first-class citizen. We've always had a tremendous amount of data as we deal with commerce all over the world, but it was generally a byproduct of the applications. It was sort of the exhaust of the applications, and here over the last couple of years, we've pivoted that story and made data, at least a first-class citizen, maybe the most important citizen. And so what we find with our business partners is that they really want access to the data, putting the right guardrails around how the data is delivered to them, what data exists in the lakes and in the core data structures that empower that kind of analytics that they really want has been the magic for us. So I'm coming down real hard on Chris's side of the equation, saying they are hungry to do real work. It's not our job to try and stop them, but putting the right guardrails and the right governance and management around data has been the best way to empower them, and at the same time keep the that incredible asset safe.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I've often said that data is the currency of digital transformation. I really do think at some point, I don't want to insult anyone in the audience, but infrastructure and applications will be less relevant. What's going to really matter is the data in the organization, both that we use for our customers in e-commerce type environments, but also you now have the technology with AI to really tease out those kernels of truth and actionable insights. So I agree so much with you that at the end of the day, it's all about the data.
I definitely want to come back to the infrastructure question, but let's run with that right now, actually, Sheila, because I think that's a really great point and something we wanted to cover at some point during our conversation is how has some of the more modern data analysis and AI tools and tricks really impacted your organization? I've been hearing so much from a lot of you folks about how this is really happening, and it can be a little harder to understand exactly how some of these technologies have delivered a real impact. And so I'd love to hear from all of you just sort of how you're thinking about that, and also how you're thinking about data maybe a little differently as your infrastructure strategies have changed with some of the new tools that are available.
Well, I'll jump on that just for a second then, Tom. I mean, because we've promoted data to be this first-class citizen, we've also put in place an organization of business analytics and really empowered them in cloud technologies, because frankly there's just no comparison to the way that technology in the cloud exists to take advantage of AI and ML and different classes of data analytics than ever existed before. So frankly, we have the ingestion and induction frameworks in IT, but that's the place where we turn the business analysts loose, and we call it FedEx DataWorks. And we've kind of, pulled together data scientists from around the business organizations and dropped them into DataWorks, and they are getting stuff done so fast with those tools. They are really a powerful organization, and it's been on me. The onus has been on me to make sure my team calms down about this and doesn't become threatened by what's going on in DataWorks, because their systems of insights really feed off of our systems of record. We're mostly responsible for transactional systems of record. They create insights with the data that gets spun out of these environments, and they're doing that in a way that really is empowering customers and operations and everything across our business. It's very cool what they can accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump on that. And Rob, you said you made data a first-class citizen, right? I love that tagging. So we have this concept of creating a digital brain here at ServiceNow. And underneath that tagline is really, how do we have an AI-driven journey for every single customer of ServiceNow, and AI-driven decision-making capabilities for every persona? When we looked at, the average salesperson, we picked them first. I think there was 3,000 individual decisions they could make every day about what they do with their customer. So how do we feed to them the insights that are going to help them help their customers be the most successful? And we're replicating that across, every single persona. One of the things, however, I've seen with AI is there's often a lot of excitement at the beginning, and then it kind of like tapers off as people don't see the results. And I definitely think measuring the value of this is around the effectiveness of decisions, speed of decisions, but also sometimes it's preventing a negative from happening, because the AI system is giving you insights that allows the humans to act before that bad thing happens. So I think really aligning with stakeholders around how one is going to measure the value of these AI investments gets super critical, along with, I don't think anything I haven't solved it, which is the more sophisticated the AI algorithm, the less understandable it is by humans, and humans want that explainable AI. So that's something that's could be a barrier to adoption, but the value in terms of this AI-driven journey is absolutely there.
So as far as we're concerned, data and AI are really central to our digital strategy. We began our journey about 5 years ago, and we now passed the experimentation phase. We really scaled AI solutions and sophisticated application across all the dimensions of our business. On one end, to predict outcomes, so what's going to happen next, and increasingly to prescribe action. So take the outcome of AI, inject it into our processes through automation. And so the application range from product innovation. So we use modeling simulation. We can now create alternative formula in the space of days compared to months. We use AI to engage and communicate with our consumers in an advertising world that is increasingly driven by programmatic. And so we engage with them with AI to deliver the brand messages at the right time, on the right channel, and with the right content. We use AI working with our retail partners to make our products available where, when, and how consumers want to shop for them. And also in our operation, one example is in the manufacturing space, when it's about quality control, equipment resilience, even sustainability with energy, water consumptions, using sensors, images to replace a lot of manual work and make sure that real-time decisions are taken next to the production line. So, and all that scaling the technology, right? So investing on a scalable data and AI environment with excess of 9 petabytes of data in our corporate data lakes, and above all, skills. So hundreds of talented data scientists and engineers who understand our business. So I can't emphasize more, if there is one thing that is central to digital transformation, is data and AI, machine learning applied to them.
Yeah, and finally, I completely agree. I would just say that there is so inextricably linked, and it's the next evolution of the journey. When you think about it, a digital transformation involves multiple functions in a company, and yet most of us are organized functionally, and the transactional systems are functional. So your ERPs, your SAPs, your financial systems, they're all about transactions around that function. So when you bring all that data together in an enterprise data warehouse, you've now got you've blended the organization and now have the ability to look for those kernels of truth or wisdoms, and so or moments of time. And so what AI does now, the capability of AI and technology has advanced, that you apply that to these algorithms, these questions, these ad hoc queries, to this plethora of data that we now have that crosses the transactional systems. You can really start to see things that you wouldn't see as a transactional leader of that data or just a functional leader. In fact, examples are we digitized over 200,000 contracts at Honeywell. Sales contracts, vendor contracts, direct material, indirect material, we've now digitized them, meaning they're all in templates and digital. So we can go and ask that series of contracts any questions we want to ask. What are the critical data elements, and which ones have an opportunity for us to adjust? How is the contracts being with our commitment to delivering products and services? Which ones we have something called on-time first promise? Which ones aren't on-time first promise? Where do we see some synergies around pricing? So you think about any question you want to ask to the 200,000 contracts that we've digitized. I mean, it's just amazing, the opportunity, and what you learn from this is we're just scratching the surface.
Just to come back to something you said earlier, Sheila, given the nature of your business and operating in a heavily regulated environment, do you find the challenge here with respect to data and AI different, or a little bit more challenging because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Those areas that are highly regulated and/or we have some commercial constraints of where the data is housed and what we do with that data. We have to ring fence a lot of that data off. So yeah, it's segmented by certain types of our business, but it's not the majority of our business. We have to really think through what we can get. And, with encryption and other tools and technology, you can still get anonymize the data enough so that you're still looking for those trends and patterns, which is what AI does, without giving away any secret sauce or privacy about that specific piece of data. Because AI is all about patterns, and you can anonymize that information, but it does add a level of complexity. Absolutely.
And if I could just add something there, something we did 2 years ago, certainly the regulated environment and the data, agree with everything Sheila said, as usual. I usually agree with her. But the thing we did 2 years ago was establish a data and AI ethics committee, which was really around two things. One is, are we allowed to do it in the regulated environments that we operate in? The second one was, should we do it? And the should we do it was really tied to our core values and purpose as a company, of things that we really should or shouldn't do, even if we're allowed to do it. And whether that was internally facing with our employee data or our customer data that our customers trust and put in our cloud. And I think it's been a really useful construct for us. So I think it's myself, general counsel, chief marketing officer, and a few other executives. It's really served us well.
I would add that too, in addition to the dimension of regulatory risk, and so staying out of trouble from a legal and regulatory perspective, there is also an overall risk management dimension with AI. With the highest reliance on AI to take critical business decisions, we have to make sure that those algorithms are bulletproof and they cannot lead to big issues, whether it's supply chain or commercial strategies. So an AI risk capabilities that we created need to encompass a bit the broad spectrum of regulatory as well as any other type of business risk.
I have loved getting to watch over the last couple decades, the data story evolve from data used to tell us what happened in the past. It was empirical. Then it got to the point where it could tell us what is happening. Then it got to the point where it could tell us in a predictive way what was going to happen or what was expected to happen. But this latest part of the journey is the most interesting one. It's actually kind of become clairvoyant, and it starts to answer questions you didn't even know to ask. The data has, and that's kind of the secret of AI, is it's just unlocking insights that, frankly, in our paradigm worlds, we forget to ask some of the questions maybe we should be asking.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and come back to something Rob mentioned earlier, which was just how much the nature of compute and the delivery of compute has changed so much over really the last decade. One thing I always ask CIOs that I talk to is how much they care about lock-in. I mean, how much you care about having the flexibility to operate across different compute vendors. You can ask 10 different CIOs that question and get 48 different answers. So I'm kind of curious for our panel here, how you think about that. Do you value multi-cloud? Do you value hybrid? Do you want the control that comes along with being able to have different relying on different vendors and not put all your eggs in one basket? Or do you value the simplicity that comes along with operating with just one vendor? And I'm sure there's all kinds of different answers to that. So whoever would love to jump in.
I'll do. I think first of all is why Icloud, right? Making sure that we continue to underscore the main reason of going cloud: agility, flexibility, waste avoidance, also increasingly capabilities and innovation at speed. Hyperscaler can provide things today and platform today that would be very difficult to realize on premises. If we just spoke about data and AI. Resilience, right? The fact that you have global coverage, redundancy, and also sustainability, right? Moving to the cloud, we halved our power effectiveness ratio. But that said, multi-cloud is really a choice that is driven by a trade-off. On one end, consolidating everything with one hyperscalers, and on the other end, using more than one. And the latter, so when you go with more, comes at a cost. Cost that is linked to data egressing, the fact that you have duplicate skills in your teams, and tooling. And now, on one end, if you think that avoiding the lock-in with one vendor makes you gain flexibility, in reality, you have to take account of the increase in complexity. Because today there are very few totally agnostic cloud technology. So I think that focusing on few hyperscalers and having cloud centers of expertise where all members have high level of certification for those is the way forward. And what we try to do, really, to balance the two things, not going with one, but on the other end, being totally conscious and equipped to deal with a multi-cloud environment and restricting to a few strategic partners.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have an absolutely multi-cloud strategy by intention. That's our strategy. When we think about this internally, I not only think about corporate IT, but I extend that to our Honeywell Connected Enterprise, which is our software business. And we do this kind of in joint fashion where we're looking at the demands across both. So having a multi-cloud strategy is super important. I also agree that having 10 is wrong. So we really want to focus on 2 and get really good in centers of excellence around 2. And that's what we've been doing. And we absolutely do not want vendor lock-in. So we're going to make sure we have options.
It seems to me that, we don't even recognize that often how lucky we are these days that there is a dominant design in compute, that server and network and storage and software and data all have these really common, ways to tap into compute and software, as a service. Wasn't that long ago where everything was proprietary, networks and compute and storage, all of it, and talk about lock-in. So these days with dominant design, we really do have the ability. It's true that there is plenty of lock-in on native services out there, but leaning into capabilities like Kubernetes and other containerization capabilities allow you to deploy into dominant design environments and tap into the resources that are there in ways that were never possible before. So lock-in is always a danger. Nothing's less fun than trying to rip something out of an environment, just because you have to exit that environment and you're not adding value to the business. But, we're pretty lucky today in that, we can tap into pretty common resources all around the world.
And I also think it's super important, because I am a big customer of ServiceNow, is SaaS. Because SaaS, I know we talk about infrastructure, IaaS a lot, but really it's about SaaS, because then of course the provider helps you with that kind of all those disaster recovery and all the things we have to do to protect those assets. So it's easier as well. So it balances between SaaS and infrastructure as a service. But the more we can move to SaaS, the better as well.
Well, thanks, Sheila, for mentioning that. It was nice of you. But just to go back to the other comments, I think it has to be a multi-cloud strategy with the variety and the pace at which digital transformation is accelerating. It has to be multi-cloud. And Rob, I think that was a great reminder of how far we've come. I think we forget maybe some of those days where nothing was portable to each other. But I still think we have work to do in terms of true mobility across the hyperscalers, where it's seamless as pressing, or with a couple keystrokes, you can move workloads across. But we've come so far. And I think cloud management, I love the way Vittorio framed it. Let's not forget the reasons we went to the cloud: agility, flexibility, speed, and management of it, even on the security side. So multi-cloud, and I think we're just going to get further and further into true portability across those.
So Sheila mentioned SaaS. I can't help mentioning something about SaaS that is a challenge today. As we increasingly automate our operations, and we actually eat our own dog food, right, in applying AI machine learning to IT operations, the challenge with SaaS is how much observability we have, what's going on in those environments, and how much data we can extract from the SaaS services and integrate them in our flow of intelligent operations and overlay, automation and machine learning on it. So that's still an outstanding challenge.
One other thing I wanted to make sure to ask everyone about was, there's obviously no way that your organizations aren't thinking about security with respect to just about every single one of these discussions. As companies increasingly add chief information security officers and have sort of a responsibility for that, balanced against, what you're doing in terms of your role with the technology organization and the business. How is that currently playing out? I hear a lot of people talk about how security always has to be, thought of from the beginning, not a bolt on afterwards. And so I'm curious, just within your organizations, how much that's been embraced and what challenges you think are that remain in order to make sure that all of us are doing as much as we can.
So let me start. I think, I just think that the more sophisticated the bad actors have gotten, the smarter that they are, their design of why they want to continue. I just think that we're silly to think that the level of attacks, the level of increase, the level of activities is going to decline anytime soon. I mean, I just think it's part of I go back to our mission is better, cheaper, faster, and safer. It's just now a core part of our DNA within the IT organization and specifically around the data. We got to make sure that that's built in everywhere. So exact question, and answer to your question, Tom, is we have it built into our architecture. So it's all part of the architecture. When we select a technology or a product or we start working on a program, we actually have a security track right at the beginning. It's an ongoing thing every single month of the patching and all the things we do around the operational part of security, whether on every single device inside the organization. That's laptops, desktops, it's servers, it's databases, it's everything. So I just think it's a real important discipline and it's a real important skill to build inside an organization, because I just don't see that the activity is going to decline anytime soon.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this is going to be one of those, as my boss likes to say, a race with no finish line. And Sheila mentioned there's no reason to assume the attacks are going to decrease. They're only going to increase. And therefore, I don't think it's a single strategy of security by design. I think it has to be, security by design. But in addition to a central, CISO organization, having people knowledgeable about security with all the different Scrum teams out there developing code, procuring assets from the hyperscalers and things like that. So this concept of having security champions embedded in those intact teams, I think is another critical thing. And I'll limit it to 3. And the third thing, I think there's no substitute for building one's own red team, right? Which is really going to simulate what the hackers and the bad people are going to try and do, because that's one of the best ways often to find out where your true vulnerabilities are, in addition to what all the public databases are going to do. So I'd say three things, obviously. So the red team, security champions, and in addition to the item you mentioned, security by design.
And one more thing is, this isn't a IT and a CISO problem. Security, the whole security awareness, phishing, everybody in the organization needs to understand it, just like we all have gotten smarter from a consumer standpoint. I mean, we just got to understand that you can't click on those links and you can't, give someone your PIN, you got to make sure that we're security savvy and the employees. And so that's everyone's issue that we've got to make sure that they're educated, but it really is everyone in the company, just like you protect your own personal things from a consumer standpoint.
I must echo what Chris said, having and also Sheila, the culture and embedded capabilities across the business, across different lines of business. So not just relying on a very capable CISO and her organization. We are blessed to have very talented professional in our InfoSec team, but at the same time, making sure that you have embedded in the different parts of the business, working hand in hand with the presidents and their teams, business security leaders, technical information security leaders, so that you can apply those best practices of defending, detecting, reacting, and recovering. And I must emphasize, especially the shift that we see, we're still obviously defending a lot, but the real emphasis today is to be able to detect and react and also recover. And we see that with ransomware incidents, where being able to react and recover swiftly makes a huge difference. And I would give for granted that the 100% defend doesn't exist. Something will happen regardless of how good you are firewalling or ring fencing your critical assets and critical data. But what makes the difference is the capability to detect with good monitoring. And again, as Chris said, red teams and pen testing is a great asset. We have a dedicated team for pen testing, a red team, and they do a fantastic job in finding things that we may not know about, and so that we can get organized to react and recover for potential issues.
The only thing I can think of to add is that all of us is better than any one of us, and the opportunity that we have as enterprises to engage, with government agencies, which is really important part of threat intelligence these days. Threat intel, doesn't happen because of what we see on our screens. It happens at a much larger scale with the ability to tap into intel sources. And I would just say that we all have to engage more aggressively and in more unified front, because this threat isn't going to get smaller. It's simply going to get larger. And so, we have to band together, including with key government agencies like the NSA and the FBI and CIA and everyone else. And so, that's hard to, for some companies to say, yeah, I want to do that. But for us, it's been incredibly valuable to tap into those resources to really get better intel and know what the next steps should be.
So rather than end on what is probably one of your biggest challenges, I'd love to hear from each of you about an emerging enterprise technology that really gets you excited, that one that we haven't talked about yet, that you really think is going to be an important part of your business or an important part of this industry within the next few years. And I'd just love to hear what you all think about that.
Well, I'll jump in. And so, to me, it's what happens out at the edge that's really so exciting right now. I mean, a lot of the enterprise technology we've talked about are these aggregators, but edge compute and IoT and so many things that are going on out at the edge are changing everything now. Yes, they have security issues with them, but we're deploying sensors and shipments at a rate that is really getting ready to light up shipments as they move around the world, not because of the last touch, but because they're online as they're moving through those networks. That also then opens up the era of autonomy for vehicles and so much compute going on out at the edge with better connectivity, much more portable compute, things happening at the edge that are incredibly innovative and really give us insights that have to be curated, have to be managed and orchestrated out at the edge, back into the center. But at the same time, it's the frontier, is how far out do the networks and the technologies go to enable new things that we haven't even dreamed of.
Yeah, so I'll add on to that. It really is for us, being Honeywell supply chain company, it's about smart factory. So when you think about what we can do in the smart factory with robotics, and look at how much we've come on enterprise data warehouse and the enterprise data and what we're doing around AI, and we start thinking about that as it applies to smart factory and robotics and all the things that Rob mentioned, I think we're just scratching the surface. And the other trend that I think is super important, and I know the next generation of workers care about this, but we all do, is the sustainability is real. The sustainability and for the environment, what we can do different, better. So looking at products and services and what we're deploying and how we can actually have a positive sustainability impact is going to be critical in the next 3 years.
I would echo a couple of things that Rob and Sheila have mentioned. So we talk about sustainability, the evolution of blockchain, non-fungible tokens, to be able to identify substances and follow across the whole supply chain, internal, external, how products are made and what they're made of. That's definitely something important. At the same time, Rob mentioned IoT, and I mentioned previously how much we want to use AI in our manufacturing environment. So watch the space, because very soon we'll announce something in this area. So a kind of innovation initiative with a big bet to develop a platform to scale across the hundreds of our plants. Well, last but not least, I'd like to mention something is with new generations being way more comfortable with gaming and virtual reality that we are, if I may, or at least I am, I think that we'll find way of engaging with consumer virtually that will also reverberate in our processing and the enterprise. We just ran the Consumer Electronics Show using a totally virtual platform. I don't want to use the word metaverse, that is a bit inflationated these days, but definitely I think the hype around virtual realities and hybrid environment is going to become less of a hype and more a mainstream reality going forward.
Yeah, and I get excited about all of it. So it's really hard for me to pick one individual technology. I think what's really exciting for me is the technology strategy really is the business strategy. So whether it's edge computing, emerging virtual reality, IoT, AI, ML, all of it, it's really, I think it's such a great time to be in technology, because we get to take all of these technologies, and what gets me really excited is the application of them. How do we make them real? How do we further that, customer experience, customer journey, create a talent advantage for our companies, intelligent operations, as Sheila mentioned. So sorry to dodge your question, but it's really hard for me to pick one. I get excited about all of it.
Well, thank you all very much for your time and sharing your insights and your expertise with our audience. We definitely value it. Please come back to Protocol Enterprise for more of this in the future. Sign up for our newsletters. And if you were particularly interested in the multi-cloud discussion, we will do a much deeper dive on that in general next month. So be sure to come back for that. Thanks once again to Lenovo. Thanks to our panel. And thanks to all of you. Take care.
Thanks.